We're going to pivot to the panel on whether computers can be racist. And we had a great group for you. You all know Bradley Horowitz, who is obviously works here at Google. He's running the new, he can tell you about it, but the new area, the new entrepreneurial incubation hub at Google. And he is passionate about all of these issues and what we can do with tech. Nancy Douyon is user experience research program manager at Google, and she leads research on the experience for all new launches. So as she puts it, she gets to see, all the problems with all the products. So she's well suited to talk about these issues. Megan Rose Dickey is also here. She's a reporter who's you're probably familiar with. She works at TechCrunch, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and social justice. She was at Business Insider before that. We also have Anil Dash, who's quite a thinker on a lot of tech issues, especially in terms of how tech can be more humane and inclusive. He's an entrepreneur, he's a technologist. I believe he's recently become a CEO of a software company as well. So great group. Van's going to lead this. I will exit stage right. So have at it, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you, brother. Yeah, man. All right. David Drummond. David Drummond. That's a bad brother. If you don't worry about this stuff all the time, it's just because you don't have to. But the rest of us think about it all the time. There's the famous thing with Professor LaTanya McSweeney. And she's a professor. She types her name in. And then what comes back are these ads around, getting somebody's criminal records and all this criminal stuff. And she does the research, and it turns out that people who were offering these services had picked up a bunch of African-American names and had the ad search trigger. Downside is, if you're looking for a job and somebody Googles you to see if you're a good employee, boom, here's this suggestion that you might be a criminal. And so that would suck. So what can be done to prevent it? So we've got some examples of how bad it is. What can be done to prevent this? Maybe more inclusive hiring. But from your point of view, you think about this stuff a lot. How do you think about it?
So this particular situation with Tanya had actually some difficulty to do with the ad designers who were purchasing names of African Americans, which means that we need to be very clear about our guidelines. Right? We need to start to find a way to capture these use cases and create content around that. And the other thing is we need to be able to test those in the right environments. This makes me think of Tay, the chat box. Do you guys know about the artificial intelligence chat box on Twitter from Microsoft that became racist in 16 hours and sexist in 16 hours? What's interesting about Tay is Tay was tested for 2 years in China, where free speech is not necessarily something that's readily available. You can't just say whatever you want, right? But when it was introduced in America, even though they were testing for bias at the time, within 16 hours, like Bradley said, because they didn't have the right environment or the right people to test it on, this occurred. So how can we make sure that we have not only the right use cases available, but we also are testing in populations that might be affected? Are we amplifying the voice of the underrepresented, right? Are we testing in communities of just women? Are we testing in different socioeconomic backgrounds? So one of the things I've been pressuring, at least from a research standpoint, is making sure that from the very beginning, our research criteria is mixed as far as gender, socioeconomic background, race, even left-handedness, right? To make sure that we're creating inclusive products for better reach in the world and versatility in this world.
Anil, I want to get you in here. First of all, I love that purple.
Thank you. It's a tribute to somebody we both love.
Yes, tribute to somebody we both love. This is the first time I've been in public not wearing purple since April 21st. So, that's a whole other topic. Best practices, though. So I think we got a good problem statement, good overview. We got a personal testimonial to the need for wokeness. We got a few ideas in terms of how we can begin to improve, but Anil, I'd love to hear more from you on the same basic vein.
I look at this now, I'm CEO of a company that makes software, right? And so we have to take this head on. And the first thing I look at is educating ourselves about the issue, right? So as an industry, what tech companies, little or big, have done is a strategy of pretending we're neutral, right? And this has been a very smart thing to do from a regulatory standpoint, right? So if we say we're just a neutral platform, we just reflect society, don't regulate us, please, right? That's been this tactic that's gone over and over and over. And I look at that for like out in the world, something like Uber, where part of what they've done to present themselves is saying like, we're a neutral platform where anybody can hail a cab. And there are good things, right? So I mean, I can't even count how many black friends I've said like, okay, I can hail a cab now because I got Uber and that's great. And I say, well, yeah, but if you're operating outside the world of regulation, when they start redlining your neighborhood, what are we going to do to rein them in? And we don't have an answer there. And what they've done is very effectively use the tactic of presenting themselves as neutral or benevolent to avoid the regulatory infrastructure, the social infrastructure that we use. And we don't have that history, right? So if you want to do a startup today, you come from a CS background, and that's great. I mean, you should have those technical skills, and that's powerful and valuable. But you probably had little or no ethics training when you came up through that CS program. You probably had little or no social justice training when you came up through that program. So there's no history where you can learn about, well, how did redlining and zoning and all these other exclusionary patterns manifest in the past so that I don't duplicate them in my software? And how did the labor movement duplicate in the past? And so bringing that learning into.
When you say redlining,
yeah.
Can you just break down what that means in a practical way for people?
Sure.
Because those of us who live in this world, it's all we worry about. But
yeah.
But redlining means?
The shortest version is using policy, and particularly in the case of geography, like neighborhoods and communities, to entrench and enforce discriminatory practice around race, religion, and other systems of exclusion.
Okay, hold on a second. Look, redlining means if you live in this neighborhood, you ain't getting no loans. Mm-hmm. If you can't get a loan, you can't do much. Yeah. You have the best little company, the best little business, best little idea. If you can't access capital, you're stuck. And this practice is so pervasive that there's a term for it called redlining that everybody knows and understands. And the concern now is that rather than the technology companies actually getting us to a place where you can equally get access to stuff based on your ideas and not based on your skin color, your zip code, that it's actually coming back again. Again, we blew up the Death Star, and now here we are, back again,
rebuilding.
Same guys with the red lightsabers.
And that's it. So we don't have that history. We don't know that piece. We don't teach that there's no intro to coding program that teaches you this is what redlining is,
right.
And this is why the highway was built through your part of town and not somebody else's part of town. Right? And so until we know that, how are we going to say, well, I know how to fire up Xcode and Eclipse and I can make an app, and that means that I understand the impacts of redlining and what transportation and transit policy are. Those are two totally different things, and those groups don't talk.
But I think this, and I want to come back to you now, Bradley. I think that there is this weird thing for people in tech. You didn't set out to be a social engineer. You didn't set out to be the government. You didn't set out, this, in your mind, it must be, isn't this someone else's job to be doing? I'm just trying to make these gadgets gizmo right. I mean, I'm not a tech person, but.
That's the right term.
Right, yeah, see, I studied in the car. Mm-hmm. So, and yet, it turns out that you guys go from these little geeky people that nobody paid attention to, no offense, to kind of being like the digital lords of the universe in the digital age. So you suddenly, you can't now say, well, geez, I don't want to have to go to your diversity class, leave me alone. I mean, doesn't success then, with great power doesn't come great responsibility? I'm just asking.
So I think one thing that I've found, this concept of woke, I think a lot of people at Google, we got 65,000 employees who, in my experience, are pretty well-intentioned.
Yes.
And believe that they are doing good for the world and are sort of techno-optimists and all that. And I think what we're coming to grips with is that, as we're repeating here at the panel, good intentions are not the end of the conversation. They are the start of a journey. And one thing that I've really been making use of is there are people who've spent lifetimes thinking about this, studying it in a scholarly way, working on these issues, picking them apart, understanding them. And it's not like in an hour training, we're going to sort of get up to speed on, a system of oppression that's been hundreds of years in the making. We have to turn to these experts, and we have to invite them into the conversation, and we have to not sort of think we got this, but rather, come humbly to the knowledge that's out there already. Yeah.
Sound woke to me. Megan, you started us off. Are there things that you're seeing now that give you either great encouragement as far as, I thought that comment, that was as good as you can get, at least from an intention point of view. Are there things that give you encouragement that you're seeing developing, or are there things that give you great frustration?
Yeah, it's a combination. There's definitely a little bit of both going on. So in the last couple of years or so, there's been a lot of talk around unconscious bias trainings and increasing the number of underrepresented minorities and women and LGBTQIA people in these tech companies. But unfortunately, it seems like we're kind of getting to this point where we've kind of hit a wall in a way, and there's still the problem of actual inclusion in these companies. And I wonder, I think an event like this is totally great to, get employees at these big tech companies talking and thinking about race and injustice in the tech industry. I just want to see a quick show of hands. Let's see, was this mandatory? Are you guys here by choice? Okay. So that's cool.
Yes, we are here of our own free will because we want to be more diverse. No, this is all voluntary. It's all voluntary.
But I struggle. I go back and forth with the idea of mandates, but I do think that something like this, if it were mandatory for all employees to attend, that could be helpful. This is maybe an hour of your time.
But let me ask you though.
Yeah.
So these people are all here because they want to be, and there are people who are watching all around the country who want to be. You have a chance to talk to people who might actually be able to make a difference. What is the barrier now? Before there was almost no conversation about it. I kind of remember the digital divide back in the 90s. Is every kid going to get a computer? And now kids have computers in their back pockets of some kind. But then a couple of years ago, there was a much bigger conversation, at least talking about the need for more inclusion, more diversity. And you feel some lag between the conversations and the outcomes. What is in the way? What are some of the things that you see that may be not obvious that are in the way?
Well, microaggressions are huge, and that's unfortunately not always visible to people. It's very visible to the person experiencing that microaggression, but not so much to the outsider. It might be very easily dismissed. But I think in general, just being an advocate for diverse people at your company and listening to them and hearing them out and then thinking okay, that's interesting. How can I help make sure that this person feels more supported and actually wants to stay?
Okay, but I'm not gonna let you go with that.
Okay.
Because that's nice. But you basically are saying, just be a good person.
Just be a good person. Okay. Don't be racist. Don't be sexist.
Yeah, but I'm saying that I think most people see themselves as good people and they're trying, but something gets in the way. What's stopping it?
Go ahead, please.
So one of the things I talk a lot about designing for empathy, and I think that you can do that with your own life as well. I really believe that privilege can actually disadvantage the privileged. And so it takes stepping out of your comfort zone and experiencing other things. And actually, I talk about discomfort. A lot of people aren't comfortable being uncomfortable. But for example, I'm uncomfortable every single day, right? Every single day. And so it's one of those things where to take a moment of your day out to maybe go into an inner city and try to help might give you an experience and a perspective that might impact your work differently, right? Or
so you said designing for empathy.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, what I mean by that is in my own work, I always am trying to figure out a way to not necessarily sympathize with people, but empathize, really understanding what their needs are, so I'm designing ethical and sociologically impactful solutions for them, right? Not just trying to get it done, you know? And I think in some ways, we think about it externally, but we can also do it within our own lives.
So I'm gonna bring Anil in. What I like about what you're saying is that it builds on the earlier points, which is first of all that there are people who know a lot of this stuff. Like if you're gonna try to solve a problem, you can take the intro course, you can read a book, or you can also deal with the experts. So you're saying there are experts who need to be dealt with. You're saying also you need to just continue to just want to be good to your coworkers, and you're saying there's a way you can even change your life where you're bringing in those, and Dave and I were talking about that before, like Oakland's not that far from here. Mm-hmm. But I just think that there must be some things that are not obvious that are stopping that from happening. Because everything you guys are saying just seems so perfectly reasonable, but I guarantee you in 4 hours, people are gonna be doing something not that. So why?
When we're talking about making our products more empathetic and more ethical, a lot of what we're talking about is we need more Black and Latino creators for them. I'd say the single biggest barrier to more Black and Latino creators in tech is Asian American men. And I want to be clear here. If you look at our potential for advancement, CEO of Google, CEO of Microsoft, CEO of Adobe, CEO of my company, we are Asian American men, right? How many Asian American men are here? Put your hands up. Okay, as a percentage, how does that compare to the percentage of Asian American men in Google? Right? And we don't know our history, right? Asian Americans in general don't know we are here because we were welcomed by Black and Latino neighborhoods and communities, and then we turned our back on them, and then there's a history of anti-Blackness. We don't know that history. Now, granted, some of that's because people are new. They haven't been in this country that long. They haven't learned about the civil rights movement. Not excusing it, but I think there's a way to say there's learning to do. And what happens is if you look at proportional representations compared to population in California versus population of tech companies, percentage of white employees is roughly proportional to overall population. Representation of Black and Latino workers is extremely low. And most of the gap is taken up by Asian American workers, primarily Asian American men. We are able to advance. There are issues. Now there are H-1B issues, there's immigration issues, there's a lot of disparities, but the biggest thing we have is we take up a lot of space and we don't give a lot of voice to the people we need to hold the door open for. And one of the things I'm mindful of is white folks can't say that because they'll be afraid to say that. And I would encourage you, if you're white, don't say it. It's not your place. but that means that we have to be doubly loud if you are an Asian person in tech to talk about this issue of we take up a lot of space and we don't fight real hard. And we build systems that exclude and we don't interrogate them. So I think that's a thing that, how many of you have heard an Asian American man say this issue, talk about anti-Blackness in our community? Like, there's 3 hands, 4, and you follow me on Twitter, so it doesn't count. I think that is one of the most key issues here, and we don't have a vocabulary for it, and we don't even have a way to have that conversation without it being mediated by essentially white media, right? And it's like we don't have that dialogue between various Asian American communities and Black and Latino communities to address it.
Well, first of all, I'm rarely speechless, so.
All right.
But we have 7 more minutes. So. This question around solidarity is very interesting. One of the great achievements within the African American community over the past 15 to 20 years has been, frankly, because of leaders like Barack and Michelle Obama and others. African Americans have moved, at least so far, to a position of solidarity with the immigrant community, including the Latino community. Again, because we don't talk about this stuff often publicly, but since you went there, in the 1990s here in California, there was a big fight between Black folk and Latinos. Also on the East Coast, but I was out here for it, and it was very bad. And it was, they are taking our jobs. And what was happening was you were seeing more Latinos in the service sector and in construction, and African Americans felt like we were being displaced. And it was ugly. And African Americans, leaders of Barack Obama's caliber, stepped in and said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to be used and tricked to essentially create Jim Crow and brownface for this whole population of people who are here and they're working hard, et cetera. And yet, it was tough in the black community for a while. Also, the question around LGBTQIA, that was a tough question in the black community in the 1990s especially, because so much of our struggle comes out of the church. And it was an issue. And we have gotten to a point in the black community where solidarity, obviously you have black gay folk as well, so it's not like strictly like a racial issue, but this question around are heterosexual, cisgendered black folk going to be in solidarity with our own folk and that was a big fight. You're now at a place in the black community where a preacher might preach against that issue, that preacher will not march. That preacher will not go and actively attack. So when black folks talk about this heartbreak around a lack of solidarity, it's not out of no context. It's out of saying, here we are a community I'm a ninth generation American. I'm the first person in my family that was born with all my rights recognized by this government in 9 generations. I was born in 1968. My cousin Kenya was born in 64 before they signed the last civil rights bill. So I'm the first person in 9 generations with all my rights, and our community and the Native American community continues to be the lowest in every area. And yet, on a moral question, do we stand with the Latinos when people want to deport them? On a moral question, do we think marriage should be for everybody? If you look at our voting behavior, we are the most progressive on those issues. And so solidarity should be a two-way street.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a part of the heartbreak for our community to be seen in such a negative light often. You're the criminals, you're the scary people, you're the angry people, you're the threat. But when you look at our performance and you look at the public role that we play, I think some of that stuff is not merited. And so I want us to find our way to solidarity. And frankly, I want to find our way to solidarity with the best of the Trump voters who felt left out of this love circle. Because we have a lot of white men who are feeling left out of this love circle. And we can tell them, check your privilege, or we can say, check in with us and let's keep talking. And so anyway, I just want to say that this, to me, this particular thing, I've never heard anybody say that, what you just said. This is going to be an age and an era, the next 4 years at least, where solidarity is going to be put to the test. So that was not in my questions. So look, I just want to come back to you. I mean, here you are. What a journey. I mean, you're one of the best in your field. I mean, without question. You've done so much stuff that people use every day, have heard of. You're a legend.
Keep going.
And then you stepped on a rake, right? Any Southerners? He stepped on a rake. If you ever step on a rake, you know it. Boom! And you didn't become this bitter, how dare they? Well, maybe you did it first, but at least right now, you aren't showing up as that guy who's like angry and bitter and defensive and how dare they, and they're just playing the race card and I'm sick of this. You didn't become bitter, you became better in a way that people rarely do on any side of these issues. Why and how?
I think we should just close with that. Yeah. I think it gets down to humility, sort of. I think so many of us are good intention. I think your mandatory is a really great question, because we have those who have the most work to do may not know they have any work to do, and they're not the ones that are showing up. And I would say I fell into that category. I felt I grew up in Detroit and lived in Oakland, and I felt like most causes I was on the right side of. And I didn't understand that the work started at home until I was humbled. It took, getting hit upside my head with the rake to sort of knock some sense into me or to wake me up. And I think that's the way to approach this, is with humility. It's not a problem that needs to be fixed. It's not sort of, we'll put a patch on the code and won't be racist anymore. It's a journey we're going to take, and we have to approach it with humility. Google tends to like hard problems, and ones that may take 10 years are not things we shy away from. So I think we're in this to win it and for the long haul. And I feel that support from the company, that this is something we're going to do together. And I'm grateful to have an opportunity to be at Google in a company that cares as much as I know we do.
That's good. Well, I see that we're counting down almost 20 seconds, so I think that means we're going to go into the questions and answers. And so just so you know, you're going to get the last word because we started with you, so everybody get a chance to answer, but just get ready. So, so somebody tell me how we do the questions and answers in this joint?
We've got a couple microphones.
Mic's up.
Okay, good. So I'm going to start with you on the paper. Okay, so folks can line up on the microphone. Thank you, Michael Skolnick. By the way, give Michael Skolnick another round of applause. This is one of the great leaders. So, and often when we talk about humility, I think especially guys here be weak. I think guys here, you're going to be a less than. But when I think about some of the strongest people that I know or that I've studied, Nelson Mandela certainly was not weak, but there was that deep sense of humility that shines through. And I think that we need some models where we can still be, guys like to be guys. I mean, often, not all guys, but a lot of guys, what I'm talking about. And there needs to be some opportunity for us to understand that the call is for you to be greater. We're not trying to pull anybody down. We're not just calling people out, we're calling people up to an even, better expression of who we all can be together. So look, that said, little sermonette over. So I got two questions. One says, is our country currently in a dangerous situation where the term racism has actually been abused? And how can we determine a person is racist or just a victim of poisoning the well? For instance, half the population voted for Trump this year. Are they all racist? Welcome back, David. By the way, David Drummond's back. Give him a round of applause. This is a jump ball question. This is deep. Somebody's asking a deep question. Has the term racism been abused? How can you tell if somebody's actually a racist or just a victim of the circumstance? Are all the Trump voters racist? Jump ball, anybody.
Well, this is that structural issue, which is like calling a person a racist isn't useful. Attacking systems of racism is. And so, if you say to somebody, are you a racist? It's like, yeah, we're all participatory to different degrees in systems that are racist. The question is whether you're rooting for those systems or dismantling them, right? And so I think a lot of the rhetoric, or like everybody gets called a racist, I think that comes down to mostly white folks feeling defensive, right? It's like, why do you use this term all the time? So I'm like, I actually have pulled back on like saying you're a racist, just because it immediately is going to put up the defensive wall and it's not useful. And if I say our criminal justice system is structurally racist, do you support fixing that? You can have a meaningful conversation with people. So I think some of this is just about the rhetoric. Now I can't expect everybody to take the time to learn. Here's the perfect way to, in 140 characters to not make somebody defensive. But if you have a platform, I think it's a really important bit of work to do.
Can I chime in for a second?
Yes, sir.
So I think that's right. And but one of the interesting things that I noticed over this campaign season was how a lot of the folks sort of in and around Trump and sort of supporting him on TV and so forth, if you started criticizing him on the basis of sort of racial issues and how he's related to the Black community, Latino community, the Muslim community, they'd come back with, you're being racist, right? So I think it's very important to be able to still engage with that. So a lot of times you sort of are de-escalating And it's sort of, it feels like unilateral disarmament a little bit amongst some, progressive folks that say, well, I'm not going to call anybody racist, I'm not going to call it out, but yet other folks are sort of using this very aggressive tactic of, as soon as you make any criticism, you're being divisive, you're being a racist.
Yeah.
So I think
And they think the word is a
that
magic
never
wand.
happened to me on television. I don't know. Yeah. Other voices?
Yeah, I was just going to say that happens to me a lot. So a lot of what I cover is around diversity and inclusion, and if ever I bring up, issues of race or sexism or homophobia, I get called the racist, I get called the sexist one, I get called the homophobic one, and it's, I don't know, but that's just the internet for you, and.
But I wonder, is there something that we could do better? That's my question, because there's this wonderful man named Jeffrey Lord, who I got a chance to spend a lot of time with on television. He's actually is a wonderful person, but on this issue we would just butt heads, and he would say, well, the Democrats started the Klan. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? But that was so important for him, and we just couldn't figure it out. So I just wonder, and I wonder if I might, risk your good standing that you've developed here being woke. Not speaking for yourself, but speaking for your old self, and speaking for people who might be like your old self. And not to, worship white fragility too much. But what's more effective and what's less effective as we try to reach out? Honest question. It's not on my paper. Just honest question.
Well, I like
For
Anil's
your old
point.
self.
I think labeling is divisive. And I think, the minute somebody's back on their heels, they're not listening, right? So I think confrontational approaches towards this rarely lead to the outcomes that we want. And I think your advocacy for an approach of inclusion and love, like, empathy is a great word, sort of appeal to people's humanness. Who amongst us hasn't been otherized in some scenario, no matter how much privilege you had, you were the last person picked on the team or whatever. It's a human experience to experience being ostracized and hurt and left out and not included. And so I think, giving people that benefit of the doubt and understanding that even when you disagree, you don't have to otherize or, turn people into enemies, is both going to lead to a more pleasant journey, but also lead to better outcomes. So I think, it's very hard to be grounded in that love and approach people you vehemently disagree with who are looking to take away your rights and still have the patience and determination and steadiness to sort of approach it that way. But I think history's shown it's the only thing that works.
I'll say something about that, because it's what you're saying feels both unfair and true. Right? It feels unfair that the oppressed person has to be able to develop this capacity to help the oppressor do better. And it also feels very true. And I think that's part of the pain of being one down. Like when you're one down, you have all these sore spots. When you're one up, you have all these blind spots. So the person who's one up on race, or if you're white, I'm the most privileged person in the world. I just happen to be black. But I'm one up on gender. I'm one up on being heterosexual. I'm one up on education. I'm one up on knowing David Drummond. I'm one up on a lot of things, man.
Except the dance off.
And so in those areas in which I'm one up, I have a lot of blind spots and make a lot of mistakes. But the area that I'm one down on race, I have a lot of sore spots, and it really hurts. And I've had to figure out on national television in real time how to be hurt and how to be real about it, and at the same time how to try to keep the conversation here, and how not to try to call people out, but try to call people up. And the only thing I ask is that when people who are one up ask that of people, that they know what they're asking. You're asking somebody to do something that I don't know if you can do. You're asking somebody to do something that I don't know, you shouldn't have to be Gandhi at work. I mean, you shouldn't have to be Dr. King just to go to work. And yet, I do feel that that's sometimes what's being asked. But I love your response. And I tell you what, you guys have an incredible asset here in you because you've gone through the journey. And, you know, and I think that one danger is that we come out of hurt spots and sore spots. So even when somebody's gone through the journey, we're still almost ready to, you know, when's he gonna, you know, when was, like, and I do think that there should be some kind of, can't y'all get some badges or something once people have gotten to a certain level of woke? Can they, I mean, so we can, so we can.
I think the convention is we give them cookies.
Cookies?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. It's your woke
Anyway.
cookies.
You can actually create.
It's all right, look, Michael Skolnick gonna fire me if I don't get this next question, so hold on a second. How does a proliferate, now this is deep. How?
Go to the audience.
Oh, just go to the audience. No more questions. Okay.
You can do
You in the blue.
Well, thanks for coming, Van Jones. Really enjoyed your talk. So my question is, it's been said that the only thing that's worse than people talking about you is people not talking about you. And for a whole year, every day, every week, every hour, CNN has been talking only about Donald Trump, for better or for worse, for whatever reason. I think for all the wrong reasons, but still, that's all that I ever heard. Do you think that CNN and networks like it unwittingly contributed to Donald Trump's victory by giving him more publicity than he really deserved?
Yes. Next question.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. It's been a great chat. I wanted to ask the question, I was hoping you would sort something out for me, which is that the narrative seems to be now that the election was lost as a result of economic insecurity by those folks in the Midwest. But what was Obamacare? What was the auto bailout if it wasn't to benefit these people? And we continue this narrative. It rose with the election of Bush against Gore and Kerry, this whole idea that the Democrats can't and don't speak well to these constituents. And I want you to sort that out for me because it just doesn't seem accurate. It seems like we're hiding.
If you look at the counties that were blue for Obama, that went red for Trump, there is a direct correlation with the most recent wave of factory closures for which we didn't respond to. Now, what I will say is simply this. The fact that we then blame Hillary Clinton is bizarre. The reality is Republicans wouldn't support President Obama on anything, and they were rewarded for that. President Obama tried to do tax cuts for small businesses in the American Jobs Act, and the Republicans stopped him from giving tax cuts to small businesses because they just didn't want him to be successful. The president wanted to put forward infrastructure. They called it socialism. Now Trump wants to do it, they call it patriotism. It's the same bill. It's literally the same approach. So you are correct that it's messy, it's a lot more complicated than it is. But I think that it is also true, if you go to those counties, and I went to the counties, listen, I love the media, but I worked there. I wanted to get my own taste of it. It is in fact true that you had a large number of people who were willing to vote for Obama and vote for him twice, who in this campaign didn't see themselves reflected. And they didn't feel, listen, there are a bunch of people who were delighted by that stuff, even secretly. But I think a lot of those people were baked into the cake anyway. It's where was the swing? And my concern is that I don't want you to think that the swing came primarily from racial resentment. The swing did not come from that. The swing came from a disconnection with that candidate, with the Democratic narrative of inclusion that felt that didn't lift them up the way they wanted to be, and the economic anxiety. That is true, which means that Trump is probably worse than you fear, but Trump's voters are probably better than you fear. And I want you to know that.
Hi.
Hi.
Mr. Jones, my family was actually at the Muslim Public Affairs Council dinner yesterday where you spoke, so thank you for your presence there. And also Megan, good to see you. She was my colleague.
You too.
So proud. I wanted to actually talk, I hear a lot about fighting for certain causes, but I think the fight is often what causes the biggest divide. How do we actually have those face-to-face conversations with people that we probably don't either know that that's their perspective, or we don't meet these people? I think a lot of times having conversations online can be very tough to actually get anything through. How do we have those conversations with empathy and really understand someone else's perspective?
Well, I recently saw some work that people are doing, and I also saw some research from MIT around this that uses machine learning. When people are online and they type in a comment that may be bullying or offensive, sometimes inadvertently, it puts a little pop-up up there through machine learning and basically says what you're about to post may actually be hurtful or inflammatory or derogatory. Are you sure you want to proceed? You know, click yes if you want to, if you're a troll, you know. But a lot of people actually, when there's that moment of reflection, when it's, you know, before they actually take the act, if they just have that little angel on their shoulder, you know, they actually back out and they rephrase it and they take it down a bit. So I think there can be a role for technology to actually foster more useful conversations. And I think what we have right now is sort of, you know, a platform where anyone can say anything without consequence, et cetera. And so you're seeing a lot of, you know, the worst of ourselves out there. But I think there's an opportunity to apply technology to improve that.
Let me just double down on that comment. I think we are working on that.
Yeah.
You know, some of the folks at Jigsaw, used to be Google Ideas, are actually working on this very hard, and it's pretty exciting because you imagine the notion of sort of an empathy engine, you know, using machine learning, where, you know, literally it could be we can use it to clean up some of the trolling, you know, that you see on sites and so forth. You can also use it, as Bradley says, you know, it's like maybe you get more context and more empathy when you're engaged in one of these conversations and can adjust your message more productively. So
yeah, there's
pretty
a lot
cool
of
stuff.
There's a lot of research being done on this. Data Society, Dana Boyd's research group out of New York, they're doing a lot of smart thinking on this. I think tech will be part of the answer. The other part is at a personal level, to the point of like how to be Gandhi at work. You almost always have to lead with being vulnerable. The only way you get somebody to de-escalate when they're trying to, like, you know, you're the real racist, you know, is to sort of go back to, I'm a person and I'm trying to fight the same injustices you are. That's hard. Like, you got to be in the right place, and they can't be like the phone ringing and the baby's crying and all that other stuff going on.
How do you even find those people? Like, how do we get
they find me. I don't know. I don't. I haven't had to go looking.
Hey, after you, we got a few more folks. Just want to make sure. Thank you for the question, though. That's great. Cool. One more comment, and then we'll move.
Oh, sure. One of the things I was going to say is I talk a lot to people about lending their own privileges to people who are disadvantaged so that they can actually have a platform to feel comfortable speaking.
Wait, say it again?
Lending your privilege.
Say more about that.
So that's the idea of, for example, if I come to Bradley and we're in a meeting and maybe I'm the only black female there, maybe he'll say, you know what, Nancy, why don't you speak on this topic? Or if I make a comment, congratulate me. You know, oh, that was a great point. A way of really highlighting someone who may be of a different background, who may not have that voice to be comfortable to speak up, and create an environment where other people can speak with them too. So for people who are here who'd like to get people to be a little bit more comfortable speaking to them, by providing that privilege to someone else, that could also create the dialogue or a space to have open dialogue to really talk about some of these issues.
That's great. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, so actually my question happens to build off of that. Anil mentioned that a lot of people coming out of computer science backgrounds don't have a lot of ethics or social justice training, but there are some of us here who do. And a lot of the conversation around diversity often revolves around hiring more. But my question was, what can we do with the diversity that we already have here?
Great. I don't know. So someone else has to answer.
Just as a user, get louder. I mean, I think the biggest thing I'd love to see, I would feel better about all the Google products I use all day, every day, if I saw more Googlers standing up and using their voices. You know, when Steve Bannon talks about undermining your CEO because he is of South Asian descent, like, you know it's wrong. You know that he's going for your leadership for no reason other than the color of his skin. That's wrong, and you all know it, and there's no, I mean, this is one of those rare cases where sucking up to the CEO of a publicly traded company is the right thing to do for social justice. Like, let's celebrate it, let's enjoy it, that's great. That's a rare treat right? So I think, and it'll make your bosses happy. Why not do that? I think those are the kinds of things where you can say something that might seem obvious, but the power of your voice is, I think it's easy to underestimate when you're here. This is one of those, like, if you have somebody who's never been in tech and never been to Silicon Valley and they walk in the doors of this place, when they write their Christmas letter at the end of the year to like what we did this year, they're gonna be like, I went to Google, right? That's one of the highlights of the year. That's one of the most amazing things that happen. The thing you do every day that's just going to work is amazing to them. And so a voice that comes from this place is still amazing and has impact. And you are, the rest of the world thinks these are the smartest people in the world. And they have the most power in the world of almost anybody. And so every time any of you speak up, it carries a weight that I think it's easy to underestimate when you're all surrounded with each other. It really, really matters.
Good. So I think that's beautiful, but it may not scratch his itch. David, he's asking about what more could be done. It puts you in a delicate position. But what are the kinds of things that not necessarily even Google, but companies can be doing to leverage your existing?
Well, I think he was also talking about what Googlers can do too, and I guess my answer would be the internal version of what Anil just said, in that it shouldn't just be BGN, Black Googlers Network, who has a hoodie march on TGIF to bring these issues to the fore, like more confrontation, right? Of at TGIF of our leaders to make sure what are we holding us to account. The most important reason why we released our diversity numbers, in my view at least, maybe others disagree, was for us to subject ourselves to being browbeaten by people who think we're not doing enough, right? Because that's super important from the outside, but more importantly from folks at Google. So, I think it's another version of what Anil said about making your voices more heard. We should be hearing about this more often. At the OKR meetings, we should be demanding that, the OKR be up there, that we, ask, Sundar, Larry, Sergey, whoever else is up here, what progress have we made and why not?
That actually is the other feature question.
Wait,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to give a short response. The other thing that you guys can do is possibly bring somebody with you when you come to these race ad things, right? I remember I went to, or I heard about a Tim Wise talk, and he was talking about how we need to embrace our inner prejudice and racism, and the faster we embrace that, the faster we'll be better. And I thought to myself, who would go to a Tim Wise talk, right? Those are probably people who are pretty woke, right, so to speak, but it would be great if each one of those people took one of their coworkers and brought them into that talk or brought them into this room. There are plenty of empty seats here. That's a little surprising to me, And so what can we do, each of us? That's plenty to me. We've seen it more packed. Yes. So, I feel like we can do our part to make sure for all the future talks on Decoding Race, we bring someone with us.
Beautiful.
Okay, first I wanted to say thank you to the panel for opening up and sharing your ideas. I know it's kind of hard to maybe share your personal side at work. And Mr. Jones, my husband, who's he's a blogger on Daily Kos. He's Kid Oakland on Daily Kos. He says hello. Also, my question goes back to like what Nancy was saying, where you mentioned something and then there's trolls online that come back and call you the racist or the bigot or whatever. What are some last words of inspiration for people who really want to speak up but are maybe too afraid to say something in such a public forum?
So I guess I would say that you need to speak up anyway. Like, I don't think you guys know how hard it is for me to be present here, right? To talk about these things and constantly think about, okay, what might I say wrong that could potentially make me lose my job, right? I think, right? I think it's, if you understood just the amount of discomfort that it feels just to be a brown person at Google, for example, that more of us would be just slightly more open to stepping a little bit more forward, if that makes any sense. I wish somebody could really, truly understand daily how it feels, and I wish that was enough encouragement to just say, even a moment of you trying and asking. I had a coworker ask me one day, for example, after a shooting, did it get any better yet? And my response was, what? Why would it be better? And I remember he ran off after that. He was really scared. But I was so appreciative of him actually trying to have that conversation. Went back, found him, let's talk about this. I'm not trying to scare you off. But that was him trying to connect with me and trying to empathize with me. And that gave me an opportunity and a space to speak with them. So be careful with the minority tax. It doesn't mean harass your local black person, right? Right? It means, so be conscious of that. Just maybe ease in slightly and just say, is there any way I can help? Or if you ever need a hug, come get it, you know? Little things you can do.
Yeah, and I just wanted to quickly chime in. Yeah, in terms of, you know, so let's see. I read an article like back in like last December. It ended up getting on some like white supremacist Reddit thread. It got like hundreds of thousands of comments on TechCrunch, and it was a story that I felt very proud about writing, and I felt like it was something that needed to be said. It was, you know, of course, about race and issues of diversity in tech. And that was when I kind of had like my first major dose of then people firing back and calling me the racist and me the sexist one. But the bright side to that are the people who came to me and said, thank you for writing that. Like, this had a really big impact on me. I've shared it with my coworkers, and now we're talking about these things in the office. And so even though like thousands of people hated me, like there were some who actually, you know, got something out of it, and at the end of the day, that makes it all worth it.
Good. So I'm going to let you ask the last question. Your other three people are just being discriminated against. I'm sorry. And then I'm going to ask that we give our final remarks, probably starting with you, David, and then coming this way. Partially answering her question and partially probably ignoring it and saying whatever you're going to say anyway. So go ahead.
So I'll do this quick. The love army makes sense, right? It's something we can all do, we can all fight for and embrace others. But how do we fight a two-pronged fight when, one, it's in Washington, and as you brought up, they block everything. We're fighting this fight against people who don't respect the rules of engagement in which we are playing within. And here at Google and throughout the tech industry, they don't respect science as much. We see this kind of anti-elitism. They don't respect the science or the data, or they think that we are doing something negative or influencing in a negative way. So how do we both have a love army, but also fight a fight in which the rules of engagement on both tech and in DC are not the rules of engagement that we've been playing with for the past 8 years at least?
Good. So let me kind of take that, which is it's a tough question, and add a little bit to it so people can answer it as they will. We do have this challenge of we want to stand up for our values, and we also want to be inclusive. And that's true whether it has to do with Trump, whether it has to do with race, whether it has to do with gender, sexuality. This is a tough thing. As we think about giving folks here some guidance going forward, what thoughts might you leave people with in light of that challenge? Mr. Drummond.
I don't know if I'm the right one to
Why
don't you take it?
Why don't you take it?
Nancy?
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Look, we have to do two things that are hard. We have to stick up for our values, and we have to reach out.
Yeah.
How do you do that? And how do you think about that? And if you don't want to answer it, say, I don't care. I'm going to say what I want to say because I only got one last comment. We got 3 minutes.
I mean, from a personal standpoint, because it's really tough. I joke with a lot of people that I feel like I have 8 jobs because I really just want to focus on my skills and talents, but I know I can't, right? I know that to just say that I'm good at this without dealing with the fact that there's all this surrounding stuff that's blocking me from trying to survive in this space, it's important to me to make it better for someone else. It'd be great if everybody did their part to help with that. But I mean, like for me personally, it definitely feels like a burden that I've taken on, and I constantly am thinking about it from like a self-care perspective, like how much should I take on, and sometimes I really wish I didn't have to. That's my truth.
David.
Yeah, I would just say, so I think there still needs to be a period of militancy on values, in addition to the outreach. I'm very worried, as I had this comment earlier about unilateral disarmament, but I feel like there's a little bit of a asymmetrical kind of battle going on where you have these values and you think that there's, truth and like things that you can actually verify in the world that are true and that make sense, or there are things that are, that are principled, and you want to stick to them. And you got folks on the other side of the debate sort of, disregarding all of that stuff, right? And it gives them a leg up in a lot of ways because, they figure out how to master media and they realize that the 24-hour news cycle or the 2-hour news cycle or whatever it is, people forget when you say something that's wrong. They just come away thinking, oh, they scored a good point. So I feel, that ultimately should collapse, right? Because at some point, disinformation, you can only sustain that, I think, for so long. At least I'm hopeful of that. And I think that continued militancy in the face of that, calling it out, making sure that your values are front and center and so forth, still needs to happen before we go, we sort of let everything down and sort of, normalize every viewpoint as, can't we just get along,
right?
Right? So that would be my response.
Yeah.
Anil?
I just want to add on that. You are still, at Google, one of the most wealthy, powerful institutions that's ever existed in the history of the world. And a lot more people love searching on Google and using their Android phone and watching a YouTube video and checking their Gmail than voted for Donald Trump. You have a lot of power. And you don't have to apologize for using it. You don't have to be, half-assed about using it. I think, you have buy-in from senior level to talk about being militant, right? That is incredibly, incredibly powerful.
You signed up for that.
He said it. He said it. I heard it. I'm going to tweet it later. That'll make it true. But I mean it in all seriousness. Like there's no excuse for not using it, and I don't say that lightly because I think there's great responsibility with great power. But if you all don't step up, then who can? It's not the people who lost their factory jobs. It's not all these other people. Right? This is the place that has the power and the influence and the daily connection with billions of people to be able to do it. And I think you can do it in ways that are thoughtful. I'm fine if you want to express that as how you compete in the market. If you want to say we're better than Microsoft, than Amazon, than Facebook on this feature because we built it to be more empathetic and thoughtful because we baked our values into it, I would love to have that be the criteria by which I choose a product.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
You, and then me. Go.
Okay. Similar to what Nancy was saying earlier, I think it's really important to just stand up and support your coworkers, your diverse coworkers, and advocate for them. And if you're in a meeting with one of them and they have an idea that you like, say, oh yeah, like that was a really great idea. It's just really little things like that they can go a long way. So just try to keep supporting everyone and keep that in mind.
Thank you. And you?
Like Nancy, I was really nervous about coming up here as the token white, middle-aged Jewish guy, representing, and you were all so inclusive and gracious, like way too much, in fact, because basically all I did was show up. But I do love the idea of bring someone who needs to be here that isn't inclined to come, and I think that's a great way just to catch the infectious, positive energy that I'm feeling in this room.
Very good. Well, look, I want to thank everybody here. When we talk about love and we talk about militancy, those things go together very well, honestly. Like a mama bear is militant about her love for her cubs. Love is not weak. Love is the opposite of weak. And I think it's about loving harder. I'm concerned about the people who Trump is targeting, Muslims, everybody. I'm also concerned, just such a long list, But I also want to say this. This is a challenge. I'm also concerned with the people that he's tricking. When he tells coal miners he's going to frack everywhere and give them their jobs back in the coal mines, he's tricking them. If you frack everywhere, you collapse the price of natural gas, you put every coal miner out of work. That's my problem too. I'm for underdogs in red states and blue states. And I think that that's the winning formula. And so I want to be militant about the love that I feel for the dreamers and the Native Americans who are out there fighting for the pipeline and those coal guys who are being tricked. And if we're that way, we're going to win. So thank you very much.